by as we tape this, a beautiful, clear morning to be outside on our porch. Some of the heat has blown away as we're here now on August 18th, 2024. And we've been sharing the last few weeks on the God who restores, and this is part 5. And we've been speaking on this and how restoration brings back what's been lost, broken and damaged. Last week, we talked about how he restores the song to the reed that's been crushed, and he refills our life with the oil of the Holy Spirit when our life gets a little low and the flax in that begins to smoke. And to restore means to give back, to return, to put back, to put back into use or service, to put or bring back into a former or original state, to put in again into possession of something or someone. And you know, there's times in our life that we need restoration. We all need that. And we've stated before that we restore what we value. And so then restoration involves investment. I've worked in the construction industry for 50 years, and I'm still involved in some things. My father did some restoration work in Williamsburg back in the 50s. We're very knowledgeable in antique restoration and replication of furniture that was built several hundred years ago. And so we've always had a value of those things and the history behind it. And because of that, there's been a great investment in our life, learning the techniques to restore and the procedures and the kinds of wood and the applications to go into that. Restoration involves a thought and an idea from God in a heavenly realm. He sees the broken, but he has a great rescue plan, and he sees the worth of rebirth, like one evangelist of old used to say. The family is the very center of the heart of God. And Genesis 12 in verse 3, when God spoke to Abram, and he was living in Haran and among some of his kin and everything. And God spoke to him and said, "Get out of your country and from your family and from your father's house and to a land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curses you. And in you all of the families of the earth will be blessed." And God has a heart for family. And sometimes he picks out, like he did Abraham. He had a point man to bring the blessing of God into the earth through faith. And Abraham was a person that believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. And it says in Acts 3, as Peter quoted some of that from Genesis 12:3, but in Acts 3:25, he said, "You are sons of the prophets and of the covenant which God made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, in your seed," or the seed of the woman there, which meant Christ, all of the families of the earth shall be blessed. To you first, it says in verse 26, God, having raised up his servant Jesus, sent him to bless you and turning every one of you away from your iniquities. It's always been in God's plan to see him step into the now of our life and make a difference. He even said that the power of the Holy Spirit, the promise is given to you and to your children and children's children, to all who are afar off, as many as the Lord our God shall call. God is interested in the family. Over in Acts, the 11th chapter, Peter was rehearsing how he had gone to the house of Cornelius, a Gentile and a centurion that had sought God and given alms to God and built prayer houses and things, synagogues for the people of God, but as an outsider. And God spoke to him and said, "Go and find Peter dwelling in Joppa in the house of a tanner named Simon. Go and speak to him." And it says in verse 13, he told us how he had seen an angel standing in his house, Peter was rehearsing later, who said, "Send men to Joppa and call for Simon, whose surname is Peter, who will tell you words by which you and all your household will be saved." You see, God is interested in you, but he's also interested in the family. In Acts 16, in a incredible event where Paul and Silas were thrown into prison, and they had their backs beaten bloody, their feet fast in stocks in the prison, and in charge in the charge of a jailer in the prison. The jailer was a cruel man, and he had done all those things to him. But Paul and Silas prayed at midnight and sang praises, and all of a sudden there was an earthquake, and all of the locks on the prison doors came open, and the jailer went in ready to kill himself because it was a penalty that if one of them escaped, he would take the place and die in their place. And Paul said, "Do yourself no harm, for we're all here." And the man immediately fell down before him and said, "What must I do to be saved?" He said in Acts 16:31, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and you will be saved and your household." And it said, then he spoke the word of the Lord to him and all that were in his house. And the jailer that same night, or that same hour, took him that night and washed their stripes. And immediately he and all his family were baptized. And when he had brought them into the house, he set food before them, and they rejoiced, having believed in God with all his household. That's mentioned 4 times in 4 verses, that God is concerned about the whole unit. He is concerned about your home. He is concerned about enveloping your children and you with his power, that you have an intimacy knowing that Jesus is Lord and that God has a plan for your life. Families need to be restored. This comes up all the time in pastoral counseling. Let's look a little bit at even the conditions of the world. And Paul said this over in 2 Timothy 3 in verse 1 and 2. For know this, in the last days, perilous times will come, difficult times, painful times, savage times, fierce, grievous, things hard to deal with. It says, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers. And here's the next one, disobedience to parents. Even it'll begin to affect the children. And believe me, that's not just about the kids that are 19 years old and getting a little rebellious, or they're wanting to try their own wings. This stuff comes even as early as in early elementary school. And there is a rise in those kinds of things. People who are lacking self-control and unforgiving. These are the signs of the time. Even there it says, though, they have a form of godliness but deny the power thereof. Do you know how many kids are being made to go to church? They're being made to follow a certain dogma or something like that, and follow a certain practice in their home, but God is not in their hearts. And when they get a little bit older, they will turn to those things that are outside influences into them. Parents, you've got to watch, and we had to watch our kids when they were in school, and our kids went to public school, and so they were thrown right out into the middle of the whole thing. And we just told them, if you really know the Lord, then you'll come through. And the test of of your faith will be as you walk among those who are outside of the atmosphere of your faith and of your relationship with God. And we're thankful for what had occurred in their life. The current conditions of the world, Luke in chapter 17 said in verse 26 and 27, as in the days of Noah, so will it also be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. They were bought, they sold, they planted, they built houses, they were marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark. In the days of Noah, the Bible said that the earth was filled with violence. Who cannot say today that the earth is filled with violence? In Jeremiah, he talks about a time because of the way that they had walked away from the covenant of God and they were now in captivity. And Jeremiah made a picture of the state of rebellion in Israel at that time. Tell me if you think it relates to today. In verse 21 of Jeremiah 9, for death has come through our windows. It's entered our palaces to kill off the children, no longer to be outside, and the young men no longer in the streets. You want to know what drive-bys look like? There were things like that happening even back then, but not with an AK-47 or an AR. But there were things happening because the enemy is going after the kids. The enemy doesn't want your kids in the streets. You wouldn't even let your kids walk down the street now alone. And when we grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, I was living down in Whitehall and riding a bicycle all over Bexley and Whitehall and everything, and nobody cared. And we were playing hide and seek until 11 o'clock at night in the summers under the street lights. That's just not a thing that we do nowadays because of the violence that is in the earth. People are walking away from their faith. The culture has assaulted the family unit. They've made parental authority look like it's out of touch and no longer relevant. Even the sitcoms and those things that are on TV always shows a dad that's out of touch or kind of a buffoon, and the mother and the kids are kind of like smirking at him all the time for the stupid comments that he makes. And there are the economic pressures of two-income families. And let me tell you something, going to prisons and adult prisons and jails, the gangs that are out there in the neighborhoods are competing for youth today. They're showing an alternative to the family unit. The family unit is separated in many inner city type of households, and these guys are looking for something to belong, so they sign up in these gangs. And believe me, the schools are indoctrinating our kids, and with an attack against Christianity. It's not against anything else. They attack faith and they attack prayer, and many kids are leaving the faith after attending or during college years because of the academic apostasy that is prevailing among the teachers in some of the institutions in our land. Financial pressures at home, the availability of substance abuse, sex abuse, porn, and media overload. Take your pick and let me and see if any of those things could be influencing your children. We can write books on keeping the family unit together and marriage is strong. But what about the family members that are already in sin and unbelief? The runoffs and the walkaways. The streets are full of them. There is, though, an answer. In Psalm 107, God deals and is shown as the God who delivers, who brings back, who changes the landscape of our life personally. Psalm 107 in verse 41 said, he sets the poor even on high and makes their families again like a flock. You know, God always gives a promise and a hope that the things that may be going to hell in a bucket at the moment around you he can bring back together if we put him first and we begin to seek him. And as we go forward, we'll spend a couple of weeks and we'll start with that here this week. In 1 Samuel 30 in verse 1, David was off with his gang of men. He had been running from Saul and he'd been living in another country and at that time, but he was fighting wars and battles in the name of the king of the Philistines. And it says that they, while he was out fighting the wars for this king, he really didn't have any business doing any of that. He left all of their families. There were 600 men. He left all of their families and their little ones and their possessions back in a town called Ziklag. And while they were gone, the Amalekites came in the back door and they took all of the wives. They took all of the kids and all of the possessions and left. And so when his men and him came back from fighting the wars they shouldn't have been in, it says that they found their place deserted, their families gone, their possessions gone, their children gone. And they began to lift up their voice and they wept until they had no more power to weep. It says in 1 Samuel 30 in verse 5. Sometimes even they were thinking of stoning David because he was the leader and why'd you get us into this mess and look at us now. And it says that they thought about killing him. And it said that David turned himself away and strengthened himself in God. And David spoke to the priest Abiathar at that time, who was the mediator that God had in that office to inquire of God. And he spoke to Abiathar, Abimelech's son, and he said, shall I go after these people? In verse 8, shall I pursue the troop? Shall I overtake them? And the Lord spoke back to him, because God is interested in your family. And he says here, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them and without fail recover all. You see, even though the enemy comes in through the back door, you can step up as a father. You can step up as a mother. You can step up and say, how do I get my family back? And God will always come back with a pursuit plan. You know, when we trained a lot of football players and you got these fast guys catching the ball on the end and running down the field, but there's a defender out there that will keep you from getting in the end zone. And he's stationed back away from in the backfield a little bit, but he's got a pursuit angle so that as you're running like that, he's running like this so that he can catch you at some point. And those are all designed plans and plays. And when we ask God, how can I recover them? He'll say, pursue. And the word there means to follow in order. Get a plan to capture or to defeat or employ measures to obtain the goal and to accomplish. A pursuit angle means to engage and to chase down. Your family is worth the pursuit. It's worth the pursuit. And you know what David did? It said he went further, started to pursue him. He found a person wandering around in the field that gave him the location of where they were. He saw the captives. He saw his wives. He saw the kids. He saw all the possession, and he went after them. And it says in verse 18 that David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his wives, and nothing of theirs was lacking, either small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything which they had taken from them. David recovered all. You see, our God is a God that has a plan to not just help you, not just to make it better for you. He wants to recover your kids. He wants to recover your marriage relationship. He wants to recover your kids' relationships. I want you to know something. I'm for victory, and Jesus is for victory. We're going to talk about this in detail next week when we start to cover how to pursue and engage to get those back, and the prayer, the promises, the protections, and the persistence. We're going to do that. But God is a God that wants you today to know that your family is worth fighting for. Your family is worth the investment to pray and to seek Him, to know that there's a plan, and when God is involved, God brings the victory, and God will enable you to recover all. If you have any questions on this, or any comments that you would like to me personally, you could private message me right here on Robert Fry Facebook. We're here all the time. We're answering prayers. We're praying for people and all kinds of things every week, and it's growing, and we're thankful for that. If you would like to give into this ministry, we need that to see some new things happening here this fall, and to bless more and more people. And if you'd like to be a part of that, you can reach us at robertfryministries.org. There's a giving section there, or you can see the Cash App at the bottom of this page. We love you today. We know that God has got something good for you. He can restore anything, and He's meaning to recover those families. We'll see you again. God bless.